Talking about the Building Bridges initiative as part of the issues that are shaping the agenda for the country this morning, together with Honorable Professor Mohammed, Sheikh, Omar. And before we went to the link, Mheshimiwa, we had just started exploring sort of the issue of resource allocation. This is a hot button, if you may ask me. There was a time back when there was that heated debate about the one man, one shilling vis-a-vis one man, 1 kilometer, formula of, allocating resources to different regions. I don't know what your justification would be for those who believe, let's take resources to where we have people who are going to be in need of this particular, these investments by the government and all that, vis-a-vis populations that areas where they do not have many people. So how do you justify that?
Let me tell you this. Each kilometer in my constituency is so important in terms of investment. It is much more over our acres. People talk about acreage in urban centers. So people talk about acres. For you to buy a house, an eighth of an acre, you look at the value of your land at that level. For us, the value in our land is so important simply because that's our grazing place. That is where, our animals graze. And therefore, those kilometers are quite critically important.
Mheshimiwa, let me cut you short. We are picking up from there in a bit. Let's just go back and finish up with this. The ICTCS Joe Musheru is currently speaking at the Kenya-Iran Business Forum. Let's listen into what he has to say.
Kenya is at the heart of Africa. Actually, if you look at the map of Africa, Your Excellency, Kenya is right where the heart is. And it is where we've been working hard to ensure we are providing access to the rest of Africa. As my good friend Richard Ngatia talked, we have the Continental Free Trade Area. The Continental Free Trade Area means we now have access to over 1.3 billion Africans. And so the innovations that we're talking about here will be able to reach not just all of Africa, but we can go to the rest of the world. It is our intention to continue to expand some of the investments that we've been putting into this sector. So within the continent, our presidents came together and formed what is called the Smart Africa Alliance. And the Smart Africa Alliance brings together about, right now, 36 African countries. And our plan is to create a single digital market. Within this single digital market, there is no roaming. So you're able to use your mobile phone number in any of the countries. And we plan to expand this to all the African countries. At the same time, the data services are standard. So you're not being charged more by going to one country versus another. We've also gone further and introduced the mobile money interoperability, so that if you have got mobile money in Kenya, you can be able to use that in Tanzania or in South Africa, in all the different countries that are part of the CFTA and also the single digital market that we're working on. Within Kenya, we have a great and innovative youthful population. As Your Excellency, you've mentioned, innovation comes from some of the problems and challenges that we face. Currently, COVID-19 has been one of the major challenges that the country has faced, and we've looked at ways of innovating. So as well as the government policies that we put in place to ensure that social distancing, washing hands, wearing masks, all those things are taken into account. We also put in challenges for innovations. And similarly, even here in Kenya, some of our students were able to develop ventilators. Others are working on tracking systems for the different people and passengers. And these solutions are working very well for us. So we're very happy that as we come together here, we can be able to really grow the innovative nature and characters amongst ourselves. When we exchange ideas, when we learn together, then we can actually innovate together and be able to grow. Kenya has innovated in many aspects in terms of technology, and primarily because we've put in a lot of investment as government in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education, in terms of security, in terms of ensuring that the laws that we have put in place ensure that both the intellectual property of innovations that are being created are protected, and at the same time the ability to market those products, those services is made available, and we have a legal system that is easy to understand and that can be able to protect the many innovations. We have, as one of our flagship projects for 2030, the Konza Technopolis, where we've made a lot of progress so far in building the horizontal infrastructure. We have started now on the vertical infrastructure. We've universities coming up, we've got hospitals coming up, we've got schools, and many other businesses that are now growing within the Konza Technopolis. So we plan to see how we can expand, and we hope that the innovations that will come out of this hub are going to be able to take us forward and really create the jobs that we need for our young people so that we can increase and improve on their livelihoods. So since I was not the chief guest, I will not speak much more than that, but really to welcome you again, Your Excellency, to Kenya, and look forward to having more interaction and discussion. And really to the Iranian business community, take time to also meet with our business community. As you've heard from their leader, they are very keen to interact and learn from you, and also you learn from them. And I believe we can be able to come up with very big and great ideas that we can then commercialize and transform the lives of people, not only here in Kenya and Iran, but in the rest of the world. So thank you very much, and God bless you all.
All right, ICT CS Joe Musheru currently speaking at the Iran-Kenya Business Forum happening at the Iran House of Innovation and Technology, talking about how Kenya has invested heavily on innovation in technology and also what is being done to market and protect some of these innovations, talking about how the center that function is currently taking place is expected to really boost innovations in the country and also provide job opportunities for the young population. It's a forum that also seeks to strengthen trade relations between our country and Iran. We will be giving you more details about what is emanating from that sitting as we proceed with this particular broadcast. Now, let's come back to what we have been talking about, the state of the nation. Mheshimiwa, before we took the link, we were talking about the formula to use in resource allocation, and you said from where you come from, you value every kilometer. It's critical. This is something you hold dear. So just explain to us how you justify how we should go the one shilling, 1 kilometer route.
You see, in the urban part of Kenya, the developed part of Kenya, I'll put it that way, say, as a simple example, Rift Valley Central Province. These provinces are the breadbasket of this country in terms of agricultural products. But if you tell me somewhere in Homa Bay, they have got their own way of feeding the Kenya, and that is through, fishing industry. We feed Kenya with meat. The nice sausage that you find in the shelves of the supermarkets and the shoppings. Those sausages that you take for your breakfasts in the morning do come from our place. And therefore, those kilometers feed those animals where you get the sausage from. And therefore, that is why we are leading in over 85% of the meat products come from those regions, the nomadic pastoralist region, which is about 80% of Kenya's landmass. And therefore, you're looking at that. I'm not only focusing on Wajir South, particularly in that case, but that 80% of the landmass of Kenya are arid and semi-arid regions. And therefore, they feed the animals there. And those animals feed the country. And that is exactly the example that I've given you, that those that are producing fresh products, those that are producing fisheries, and those that are producing meat. And therefore those kilometers are critically as important to us. When it comes to population now, it is also equally as important. I can contest there are very few and handful constituencies equivalent in population to Wajir South. 300,000 is at the minimum in the last census that we had.
300,000.
300,000 is my population. 298 is 3,000. Round it off. Less 2,000. Population, and actually we have estimated it to be about 450,000. And that population is underrepresented. And therefore, you want to tell me 1 kilometer, 1 shilling is not good enough for those population. Because people decided to live in particular areas, they decided to live those number of kilometers to graze their animals. If every kilometer we would have had a village, where are we going to graze our animals? And where are we going to feed, how are we going to feed Kenya? How are we going to export our meat? How are we going to be giving products to the Kenya Meat Commissions? You know, how are you going to get your sausage in the morning? And these are critical factors that have not been opened up. And therefore, every kilometer for us is quite important for us. And therefore, 1 kilometer, 1 shilling is something that you cannot divert from the Kenyans in the north or the Kenyans in the arid and the semi-arid region. That is why it is so valuable to that. And therefore, investing on the human head is equally as important. You may have 1 million population in a particular county, and you may have, 500,000 in another county. Those are all Kenyans, and the Constitution provide that every head, every human being must be equally provided. Service must be provided equally to them. Right. And that is where our argument comes in.
All right. This issue of marginalization, it's perennial. It's something that has been there year in, year out. What's the missing link? What is it? Are we really being genuine in when we say we want to address this issue?
In my last conversation
what do you read?
In my last conversation with you here, I said if Adam and Eve came today, they will identify with GS South. And I want to keep repeating that. It might be monotony for me to keep repeating it, but it is worth informing people and having that in mind. If there is no single kilometer of tarmac since independence in my constituency, which is the second largest in the country, equivalent to 3 regions, tell me, is there no marginalization there? The last mile has not reached in my constituency. It has not reached, it has not touched. Water is not there. You want to tell me 35 billion shillings in Aurora Dam and any other dam, and a dam in Kirinyaga that's just being advertised now, 2.1 billion that has been said in the papers today in Kirinyaga. What is not happening to Wajir South that does not get even 100,000 cubic meters water pan? That would be helping so much population. So this is where it is.
That is why I'm asking you, what do you think as a leader coming from that region, which replicates what is happening in other regions across the northeastern region? What do you think is the missing link? Why are we not solving this problem once and for all?
You see, let me say, and I'll be categorical here, and I mean, I need not to beat about the bush. Marginalization has been deliberately done through subsequent governments. People were talking about providing service to the communities. What are the services that are being provided to the communities? You want to link 50 years of independence and say, we have already taken money to the mashinani. You took it the other day. You've not taken it since independence. You've just started that. And the fruits are being seen, but the fruits cannot be seen very well within a short period of time. You cannot make a comparison of 50 years to 10 years of devolution.
Devolution, yeah.
It is impossible. And therefore, we cannot bury our heads in the sand. We do support governments, and we stand by governments, but we must say the failures of many subsequent governments that were here since independence. And that is not providing 100,000 cubic meters water pan to a place that is, look, I've got 7 wards. 4 out of the 7 wards are, saline. Boreholes cannot be done. The water is saline. So the only source of water could be a huge dam. A 1 billion dam would really, really help these places. And the 4 wards are neighbors. That's why the land formation is the same. And therefore, here is where it is. Services are not looked across the board. It is about who is close to the pie. That is where it is. And that is where the representation comes in. So what are you advocating? You want representation to mean what? To have people from those regions represented in the national leadership, or what is it that is your work? At the same equivalent as the rest. And therefore, you know, as they said, you know, some people are, you know, more equal than others. That must stop. And that must stop. And I will be very categorical here. And I don't have to mince my words on this. You know, everybody is important, but there are those that are more important than others.
But do we
that should stop, ideally.
Do we need to change how we describe national leadership, or do we need to have every community represented in the national leadership? Which direction do we need to go? Because I believe, like you said earlier, we cannot have everybody fully represented in the spaces that we have in the national leadership level. So is it perhaps about time for us to really redefine how we look at this?
Let's not put our heads, you know, so narrowed to representation as only who is the president and who is the deputy president, who is the prime minister. That is not what exactly the representation is. The numbers of people. Now, a whole, you know,
but we're talking about the national cake. That is where decisions about where the pieces of the national cake are made.
At the national cake, when you are going to have so many ministers and you only have one minister to represent an entire region, that in itself is critical. And it is important that that is recognized. But that is not even the only thing that I really want to put myself into. It is about providing the leadership not at the narrow end. So if you are up there in the helm, you must also surround yourself among people who can really clearly represent the entire region. So if you give me a particular representative coming from a narrow end of the constituency of the region, and that individual only focuses on that particular region, that particular village that he or she could be coming from, that in itself is underrepresentation.
Yeah, that's why
at the leadership top level, if they find that that kind of, you know, categorization is done, then the big stick needs to be taken.
That's why I asked you, maybe it's about time we redefine national leadership.
Exactly.
Because we cannot afford to have everybody on the table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So redefining that is very important.
All right. Talking about areas that have been marginalized, the northeastern region for a very long time has also suffered the perennial issue of insecurity. I want us to talk about that in a bit. If you look at what is happening right now, how do you assess the security situation in the northeastern region where you come from?
Look, the security situation in the northern region there is a challenge, and we will not hide from that. But let me take you back to what security situation that we want to talk about here. There are three categories. There is the usual banditry that causes insecurity, mayhem, and you know, people cannot travel on buses and all that. There is the Al-Shabaab phenomena, and then there is the pastoralists that are fighting and contesting over grazing. So those are the three categories of insecurity. And now we cannot, you know, say that all size fits all when it comes into handling them. So each one needs to be handled in different categories. And that is where the national security needs to focus on. My take is that you must define insecurity. I mean, we have taken it wholesomely. Unfortunately, that is wrong. We need to define it. We need to open it up. We need to use a finer lens to say that the insecurity that happened today is not Al-Shabaab, but it's banditry on the road. The insecurity that happened yesterday was because of Al-Shabaab. It is not banditry. The insecurity that happened the day before is because of grazing, you know, contest for grazing fields, and people who are, you know, talking about water and the little Niagara water. In fact, if you would have given me 35 billion shillings to provide to the northern region for water, it would have been sufficient enough not to cause any mayhem. And some of the insecurities is happening because of the division of revenues to the national, the national cake, you know, being divided and used around that. So you see, lack of water causes insecurity. Lack of rain does that. Lack of, you know, vegetation in particular areas, because it will force my people to move from my place to go to another county, and therefore skirmishes does occur. To avoid that, provide us water. Give us 1 billion pan or dam, let me say it, you know, in each constituency. That will reduce these skirmishes, and the amount of money being spent on security would have been reduced. If we are going to talk realistically, that is. But that is not happening. So there are three categories of insecurity, and let's not beat about the bush. All insecurity in the northern region is not about, Al-Shabaab only. There's banditry, there is issue to do with grazing fields, tensions among communities, and inter-clan clashes, and there is also the issue of definitely Al-Shabaab. So this categorization must first of all happen, and an open discussions on the table must come forth.
All right. You've talked about the top-bottom approach to address the insecurity issue. As a leader also from the region, talk to us about some bottom-top approaches within the communities that are fighting. Are there initiatives or something that is being done from your end to provide context-generated solutions from among yourselves?
When the top listens to the bottom, that is when solution will be achieved.
So it's still about...
let me put it that way.
But the problem
when
is
the top listens to the bottom, and you know why I'm saying that? And I'll explain what I mean by that.
Yeah.
You know, in the 80s, or not even in the 80s, in the 60s, up to in the mid-2000, 2005, somewhere there, those that were handling insecurity were the elders, the village elders. That was more consultative. Up to the 80s, say from mid-60s to early 2000, it was the community that was handling that. It was the community that is being considered and communicated through. If a skirmishes occurs, I'm a neighbor to Somalia by 180 almost kilometers. I'm a neighbor to Wajir East. I'm a neighbor to Wajir West. I'm a neighbor to, Cielo County. I'm a neighbor to Lagdera in Garissa County. I'm a neighbor to Dadaab County. So you see, I am being surrounded by that. But when an issue occurs, for me, the first call I do is not to anybody else. I don't even give a call to the security personnel first. I talk to the elders and I tell them what is happening. Can you give me the actual picture? And then that is when it goes to another place. Fortunately enough, and I thank God for this, we had very little skirmishes in my place, or ignorable, number of skirmishes, let me put it that way. But what really needs to be understood is that, are we speaking to the people from one angle, or are we talking to them from all directions? How are we handling this? That is what really matters. It is not only about politicians that you need to talk about. There are issues within the politicians, and obviously that is something that I will not deny. Politicians must respect, the process of law and the justice that is required, including myself. But what is also important is societies are not categorized into one angle. They need to be spoken to, directly, communicated with directly, and they are allowed to have a space to handle a challenge that they have among themselves by conversation, by discussions, by using traditional methods of resolving matters. So unless we go back to the table and say, hey, where have we gone wrong? Then we will continue to do that. So the top needs the bottom, and the bottom
needs the top.
And therefore that is where the categorical point for me is.
I like how you categorized, the different forms of insecurity,
yes.
Talking about banditry, talking about even the Al-Shabaab attacks, and, calling for specific interventions for specific types of insecurity issues so that we can find a lasting solution. But let's talk about how bad the situation is. If you look at the impact of the insecurity in the northeastern region, how has it affected, the region in terms of development and even the way of life? How bad is it?
So bad, so terrible. And it has been there not just yesterday, for decades. It's been there for decades. And you see, if we say that we are going to live in the past and continue to bury our heads simply because of the past, it is very unfortunate. Go to the shift of war, the antagonism that happened at that particular time. I thought that it is time to move on and not to see a particular region as a hostile region. You see, every region has a problem. From every corner of this country, there is a problem. Start from the center, go to the north, west, south, and east. If you go, you will find there are challenges that are there in terms of security. Even here in Nairobi, it was, you know, we could not stay. Even when Michuki was here, the late Michuki, you know, it was ungovernable. Nairobi was ungovernable, our capital city, that actually East and Central Africa sees as the, you know, the little London that we have. There has been those challenges. So we don't need to forget that insecurities has been there and has happened. Today, Nairobi is a place where you can walk in the middle of the night. Why did it happen? Because serious decisions has been made. Now that serious decision should begin from us as leaders from the region. And I'll be you know, open and frank about that. It should start from the leaders ourselves. And that is where the buck stops at. But it also needs to be brought forward from the national level, the national government's level, to as well as the communities. And therefore, we need to look at this in a triangulated focus. So we need to look at the prism from all corners. And now everybody is engaged into that. But you ask me as a very, very important question. How much has it affected? The economy is in the doldrums there. People cannot travel easily. There are issues and challenges that are there that we really need to look at. And all the three forms of insecurity. And I don't think whether many people do categorize insecurities in northern region like that. So the three forms of insecurities must be addressed wholesomely. Even the Al-Shabaab can be dealt with by the local leaders and elders. And I want to warn the government, to advise the government, let me put it that way, not to arm locals. A big mistake will be done. It happened in the 90s, it happened in the early 2000s, and it really came back again on our face. Therefore, arming locals will be the worst decision that has been made. And history will judge me for, you know, for this. And history will say, you know, that yes, this is what some of the leaders were saying, that we should not do that. Banditry will continue. The three categories, remember again, I want to return back. So someone grazing from one part of the region will go to another part with their guns. What are they going to do? Slaughter people. It happened in many places. It happened in Isiolo. It happened in Garissa. It happened in Wajir. So it happened in many places, you know? I'm not even talking about other parts. So these are some examples. It happened in Marsabit. So what I am only trying to say is, you cannot say that we're going to arm locals to defend themselves. We want the government to defend them. We want also the local elders recognized in terms of diplomacy and in terms of defending the society from the grassroots. Right. Because they are the ones who live in that village every morning and every night. All right.
When you talk about the northeastern region, for some time now there has been phobia from people who don't come from that region to go even work and do business there, based on the fact that there was a time there was that narrative of branding people local vis-a-vis non-local. You remember the cases when non-local teachers were being targeted in some of these attacks. What is happening? As leaders, have you done anything to sort of change this belief, this narrative, for people to feel comfortable that they can actually live and thrive in the northeastern region, even if they were not born and bred there?
There are teachers that were killed that are non-locals, that are locals, sorry. There are teachers who were killed that were locals. And those teachers were being killed and targeted simply because they are teaching the wrong things to children, according to Al-Shabaab. You see, I will come back to the categorization. That is why it is important. You see, a bandit and Al-Shabaab, a bandit will want to come and rob you that beautiful watch. They rob you and they leave you. A bandit will not look into your religious perspective, will not be looking and saying that Serfine wants to come and teach something that is against our God, for instance, in quotes. And therefore, what happens is that there are those categories of the insecurity that will be dealing with that, and that are dealing with that particularly. These are men who have got no, soft heart, even for humanity, and even for their God, because that is a very wrong perspective. And I'll tell you what we are doing about in my next moment for the question you asked me. But what I want to say is that the non-locals were particularly targeted so that development does not occur in that place. Children are not educated. People are not getting the possibilities of getting the services of any other Kenyan that should be getting. These are people who have done the same thing in Somalia. They have killed teachers who are locals. You see, they have killed teachers who are locals in Wajir. They have killed teachers who are, locals, or businessmen who are locals in Wajir and in Somalia as well. So these are people who have got no stand and no religion. So you cannot put to that. The child that comes to school will definitely want to be taught by anybody, simply because they want to gain that knowledge. I was taught by some of the teachers that came from other parts of the country. I had a teacher who came from Western Kenya who started classes for me, in the 70s. They were there and they continue to remain there. So that categorization is a narrative that has been established by these thugs who want to see that they want to polarize and divide Kenyans. But we have always said we will never be divided by a thug who has got a particular aim. So Kenyans must feel that I am equally under threat as they are wherever they go in that region. So, like me, if I'm traveling around, do you think they will spare me? They will never spare me on that. So,
whether you are a local or a non-local,
whether I'm a local or a non-local, whether I speak the dialects or not dialects, there are people who don't even speak the dialects there that are among these groups. They come from any other part of the country. They come from other part outside the country, and therefore we should not, paint everybody in that region with the same brush.
All right.
It is important that it is categorized and put it differently from what a thug does.
Okay, we are going to be taking another short break right here on News Check. We're coming back with much more, so stay with us. And plus, continue interacting with us on social media at KBC Channel 1, at Serfine_Achieng on Twitter, Serfine Achieng on Facebook. We are coming back to pick up this conversation on the other side of the break.